The young orc woman standing at the edge of Tobias Donnelly's property held a leather-bound journal against her chest like a shield. And when she cleared her throat to announce herself, he nearly dropped the skein of wool he had been inspecting for knots. "I need you to teach me what human women like," she said, her voice carrying across the yard with more confidence than her fidgeting hands suggested. "I have heard you are a patient man, and I have questions." Tobias set down the wool slowly, wiping his hands on his apron. He was a tall man, lean from work rather than hunger, with dark hair going silver at the temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting at fine thread in afternoon light. His dye croft sat beside the lake, a collection of low buildings and open-air vats where he prepared pigments and wove cloth for the scattered frontier settlements. He had lived here alone for 3 years, ever since fever took his wife, and in that time he had grown accustomed to silence. The orc woman was young, perhaps 19 or 20, with skin the color of spring moss and small tusks that peeked from her lower lip when she spoke. She wore practical clothing, trousers and a tunic that had seen honest work, and her dark hair was pulled back in a thick braid. Her pointed ears twitched slightly as she waited for his answer. "What human women like," Tobias repeated slowly, as though testing the words for sense. "That is a broad question, miss." "Fenna," she supplied quickly. "Fenna Oakhart. My family settled 2 miles north, where the old Garrett claim was abandoned. We arrived last month." She paused, then added with careful formality, "We are trying to be good neighbors." Tobias nodded. He had heard about the orc family buying the Garrett land, though he had not met them yet. Frontier settlements were sparse enough that newcomers were always noticed, and orc newcomers doubly so. There had been talk at the trading post, some of it wary, some of it outright hostile. He had kept his own counsel on the matter, as was his habit. "I see," he said. "And why do you want to know about human women, Miss Oakhart?" Fenna shifted her weight, her ears flattening slightly. "Because we live among humans now. Because I want to understand your customs. Because if I am to make friends here, or perhaps someday court someone, I should know what is expected." She lifted her chin. "I do not want to seem ignorant or give offense." There was such earnest determination in her face that Tobias felt something stir in his chest, some long dormant instinct toward kindness that his grief had not entirely smothered. He glanced at the sky, judging the remaining daylight, then back at the young woman. "All right," he said. "I can answer some questions, I suppose. Would you like tea?" Fenna's face brightened immediately, and she flipped open her journal, pulling a stick of graphite from her pocket. "Yes, please. And should I be offering tea? Is that something human women do when they wish to be hospitable?" Tobias blinked. "Well, yes, generally speaking." She wrote that down, her handwriting surprisingly neat. "Good. What else?" He led her to the small covered porch behind his main workhouse, where he kept a kettle and a fire pit for breaks between dyeing batches. The late spring air was mild, carrying the scent of wet wool and crushed woad leaves. He set the kettle on and gestured for Fenna to sit on the bench he had built years ago, wide enough for 2. "Human women," he began, feeling absurdly self-conscious, "value courtesy and thoughtfulness. Small gestures of care, remembering details about them." Fenner wrote furiously. "What kind of details?" "Things they have mentioned liking, a particular flower perhaps, or a type of sweet, how they take their tea." He poured hot water over the chamomile leaves he kept in a clay jar. "Do you take honey?" "I do not know," Fenna admitted. "I have never had tea before." Tobias found himself almost smiling. "Then we will try both ways. You can decide which you prefer." He prepared 2 cups, one plain and one with a spoonful of honey stirred in. Fenna tested each carefully, her expression thoughtful, before declaring the honeyed version superior. She wrote that down too, though Tobias could not imagine why tea preferences would be relevant to understanding human women. "What else?" Fenna asked, cradling the warm cup in both hands. "Conversation," Tobias said. "Asking questions about their lives, their interests, listening to the answers." "What do human women like to talk about?" Tobias considered this. "It depends on the woman. Some enjoy discussing books or music. Others prefer practical matters, farming, craft work. Some like to share stories or gossip about neighbors." He paused. "My wife enjoyed talking about the dye work. She had strong opinions about which mordants produced the best colors." Fenna's ears pricked forward with interest. "You are a dye maker. I saw the vats, but I was not certain." "Dyer and weaver both," Tobias confirmed. "I prepare pigments and cloth for the settlements, mostly practical goods, work clothes and blankets, but sometimes finer pieces for special occasions." "That must require great skill," Fenna said, leaning forward slightly. "How did you learn?" And so they talked, the afternoon slipping into evening as Tobias found himself explaining the intricacies of his trade. He described how different plants yielded different colors, how iron mordants produced somber tones while alum brought out brightness, how timing and temperature could mean the difference between a rich blue and a muddy gray. Fenna asked question after question, her graphite flying across the pages of her journal, and Tobias discovered that he had missed this, the simple pleasure of sharing knowledge with someone genuinely interested. When the light began to fail, Fenna stood abruptly, seeming startled by the passage of time. "I have kept you too long. Thank you for the lesson, Mr. Donnelly." "Tobias," he said. "Just Tobias is fine." She smiled, a quick flash of warmth that transformed her face. "Tobias, may I come back? I have many more questions about human women and their preferences." "You may," he heard himself say. "Tomorrow afternoon, if you like. I will be here." Fenna nodded and hurried off into the gathering dusk, her journal clutched tight. Tobias watched her go, then turned to clean the tea things, shaking his head at the strangeness of the encounter. It had been a long time since anyone had sought his company, longer still since he had spoken so freely. He told himself it was simply kindness, helping a newcomer navigate an unfamiliar culture. Nothing more. Fenna returned the next day as promised, appearing shortly after midday with her journal and a basket of early strawberries. "My mother sent these," she explained. "She says neighbors should share what they have." Tobias accepted the berries with thanks and set them aside to rinse later. "Your mother is wise. Small gifts are appreciated in human culture, particularly food. It shows care and effort." Fenna wrote that down immediately. "What kind of gifts do human women most value?" "Thoughtful ones," Tobias said. "Something that shows you have paid attention to their needs or desires. A hair ribbon in a color they favor, a book on a subject they enjoy. Practical gifts are also well received, things that make their work easier." "Do human women give gifts in return?" "Often, yes. Gift-giving can be part of courtship, a way of showing interest and building connection." Tobias felt heat creep up his neck. Though it need not be romantic in nature, friends exchange gifts as well. Fenna nodded seriously, making another note. "And what about music? Do human women enjoy music?" "Most do," Tobias said. "Though tastes vary. Some prefer lively dance tunes, others favor ballads or contemplative pieces." "What do you prefer?" The question caught him off guard. "I am not sure that is relevant to your inquiry, Miss Oakhart." "Fenna," she corrected. "And I am trying to understand the full range of human preferences. You are human, so your opinion is valuable." There was logic in that, Tobias supposed, though something about her intense focus made him uneasy in a way he could not quite name. "I enjoy ballads," he admitted. "The old ones about the sea and lost loves and distant lands. My wife used to sing while she worked. Fenna's graphite moved across the page. Did she have a good voice? She did, Tobias said quietly. Clear and strong, the house felt emptier without it after. I am sorry for your loss, Fenna said, her tone gentle. How long ago did she pass? 3 years this winter. Fenna studied him for a moment, her dark eyes thoughtful. You must have loved her very much. I did. She wrote something else, then looked up. Do human women appreciate honesty about feelings? Or is it better to be reserved? Tobias found himself on uncertain ground. It depends on the situation and the individuals involved. Some value directness. Others prefer a more gradual revelation. He paused. Why do you ask? Because orc culture is very direct, Fenna explained. We say what we mean, but I have noticed humans often speak around things using soft words for hard truths. I want to understand which approach human women prefer. Again, it varies, Tobias said. But in general, kindness matters more than directness. You can be honest without being cruel. Fenna bent over her journal, writing intently. Tobias found himself watching the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way her ears tilted when she was thinking hard. She had an expressive face, emotions flickering across it like light through water. What else should I know? Fenna asked, looking up, and so it continued day after day. Fenna would arrive in the early afternoon, always with some small gift from her family's farm, eggs or vegetables or fresh milk, and Tobias would set aside his work to answer her questions. He explained human customs around courtship and marriage, the importance of propriety and reputation, the unspoken rules that governed social interaction. He described what kinds of compliments were appropriate and which were too forward, how to read subtle cues of interest or disinterest, what topics were suitable for polite conversation. Fenna absorbed it all with fierce dedication, filling page after page of her journal. She asked about everything from table manners to appropriate dress for different occasions, from how to decline unwanted attention to how to show interest in someone without seeming forward. Tobias did his best to answer honestly, drawing on his own experience and observations, though he often felt painfully inadequate to the task. What did he really know about courtship? He had married young, to a woman from his own village, and they had settled into partnership with the ease of two people who had known each other since childhood. This business of navigating unfamiliar social waters, of trying to bridge cultural divides, was entirely outside his experience. But Fenna's earnestness touched him. She worked so hard to understand, to get things right, and she listened to his fumbling explanations with such gratitude that he found himself looking forward to her visits. The croft felt less lonely with her there, and the work less burdensome when broken by conversation. It was during the second week, as Tobias was showing Fenna how he prepared indigo from woad leaves, that he first noticed something odd about her note-taking. She had asked whether human women enjoyed learning new skills, and he had said yes. Generally speaking, skill and competence were valued. Fenna had nodded and written something down, but when Tobias glanced at her journal, angled toward him as she wrote, he saw not a general observation but a specific detail. Tobias believes competence is attractive. He frowned slightly, but said nothing, assuming she was simply using him as an example case. But then she asked what time of day he preferred for meals, and whether he liked his bread with butter or jam, and what colors he found most pleasing. And each answer went into the journal as a careful record of his specific preferences. Fenna, he said slowly, these questions do not seem to be about human women in general. She looked up, her ears twitching. I am trying to understand individual variation within the broader culture. You are my primary source, so I need detailed data. It was a reasonable explanation, delivered with perfect sincerity, and Tobias let it pass. But he began paying closer attention to her questions, and the more he listened, the more uneasy he became. She wanted to know what made him laugh, what memories he treasured, what dreams he had harbored as a young man. She asked about his childhood and his marriage, his favorite season and his preferred way to spend a free evening. She noticed when he rubbed his left shoulder after a long day at the loom and asked if it pained him often. She brought him willow bark tea the next day, unprompted, and wrote down how he thanked her. Every detail, every preference, every small piece of himself he revealed was recorded in that journal with meticulous care. And slowly, like woad leaves steeping in water, the truth began to color his understanding. She was not studying human women. She was studying him. The realization struck him one afternoon, as they sat on the porch drinking tea, honeyed for both of them now. Fenna was asking about his favorite time of year, and Tobias heard himself describing late spring, when the world was green and alive but not yet too hot for dyeing work, when the lake was calm and the light lasted long into the evening. Fenna smiled as she wrote, and Tobias saw in that smile something he had been too careful, too guarded, too afraid to recognize. She was courting him. All of this, every visit and question and carefully recorded detail, was her way of learning how to win his heart. His breath caught in his chest. His hands tightened around his cup. She was courting him, and somewhere along the way, without meaning to, without permission, he had started falling in love with her. The thought terrified him. He was 42 years old, a widower still tender with grief, a man who had thought himself done with such feelings. And she was so young, so full of hope and determination, so deserving of someone who could match her energy and optimism. What right did he have to encourage this? What kind of man fell for a girl half his age, who came to him seeking guidance and received his weakness in return? He set down his cup with a trembling hand. "Fenna, I think perhaps we should stop these lessons." Her face fell, all the light draining out of it. "Have I done something wrong?" "No," he said quickly. "No, you have done nothing wrong, but I am not sure I am the right person to teach you these things." "Why not?" The question was direct, almost pleading. "You have been so patient, so kind. I have learned so much from you." "What have you learned?" Tobias asked, the words coming out sharper than he intended. "What have you written in that journal, Fenna?" She clutched it protectively. "Everything you have told me, all the important things. About human women, or about me." Fenna's ears flattened. A flush darkened her green cheeks. For a long moment she said nothing, and Tobias felt the weight of the silence pressing down on them both. "Both," she finally whispered. "I needed to know about human women, that part was true, but I also needed to know about you." She lifted her eyes to meet his, and he saw fear there and courage. "I wanted to understand what would make you happy, what you value, what you need, because I want to be those things if you will let me." Tobias stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his cup. "You should not want that. I am old enough to be your father, Fenna. You should be looking at young men, people with futures ahead of them, not a grieving widower who spends his days alone with dye pots." "I do not want a young man," Fenna said, standing as well. "I want you. I have wanted you since the first day when you offered me tea and spoke to me like I was worth listening to. Do you know how rare that is? Most humans in this settlement look at me and see a monster. You looked at me and saw a person." "You are a person," Tobias said helplessly. "That is simply fact. But not everyone treats it as fact." Fenna stepped closer. "You did. From the very beginning, and then you shared your knowledge with me, your time, your stories. You trusted me with your grief and your memories. How could I not love you for that?" The word hung in the air between them, impossible and undeniable. "Love." "You do not love me," Tobias said, though his voice lacked conviction. "You are grateful, that is all. You are young and in a new place, and I have been kind to you, but that is not love, Fenna." "Do not tell me what I feel," she said, and there was steel in her voice now. "I know my own heart. I love you, Tobias Donnelly. I love your patience and your skill and the way you notice small things. I love that you still speak of your wife with tenderness instead of bitterness. I love that you take your tea with honey and prefer ballads and work until your shoulder aches, because you care about doing things right. I have been studying you because I wanted to understand how to make you happy, and somewhere in all that studying, I learned that making you happy is what would make me happy." Tobias felt something crack inside his chest, some wall he had built around his heart 3 years ago when he buried his wife. "I am not ready for this. I do not know if I can be what you need." "I am not asking you to be ready," Fenna said softly. "I am just asking you to consider it. To think about whether you might want this too someday. I am twice your age, so people will talk. Let them. I am still in love with my wife." Fenna's expression softened. "I know, and I would never ask you to stop loving her. There is room enough in a heart for more than one love, Tobias. I am not asking you to replace her. I am asking you to let me walk beside you if you want company." He wanted to argue further, to list all the reasons this was impossible, but the words died in his throat. Because the truth was, he did want company. He wanted her company. He wanted the way she made him laugh with her blunt observations about his neighbors. He wanted the fierce concentration on her face when she was learning something new. He wanted the feeling of being seen and known, and valued that her careful study had given him. He had fallen first, he realized. Somewhere between the tea and the strawberries and the long conversations about dye chemistry, he had fallen completely and hopelessly in love with this young orc woman and her ridiculous, wonderful journal. "I need time," he said finally. "To think, to be sure." Fenna nodded, though disappointment flickered across her face. "I understand. I will not come back until you send for me." "Fenna, it is all right," she said, gathering her journal. "I do not regret telling you. Whatever you decide, I will not regret being honest." She left quickly, before he could find words to call her back, and Tobias sank onto the bench with his head in his hands. The porch felt cavernously empty without her. The next 3 days were miserable. Tobias tried to focus on his work, preparing a large batch of matter read for a settlement wedding, but his mind kept wandering. He found himself noticing all the small ways Fenna had woven herself into his daily routine. The willow bark tea she had brought, sitting unused on his shelf. The strawberries her mother had sent, which he had made into preserves. The small wooden whistle she had carved for him one afternoon when he mentioned missing the sound of birds in winter. He missed her. God help him, he missed her with an intensity that shocked him, but guilt gnawed at him too. He would lie awake at night thinking of Catherine, his wife, remembering her laugh and her capable hands and the way she had hummed while weaving. Would she be angry that he was considering this? Would she feel betrayed? He did not think so. Catherine had been a practical woman, unsentimental about death. She had made him promise in those last fevered days that he would not waste his life in mourning. "Find someone else if you can," she had whispered. "Be happy, Tobias. Do not be alone." He had not really heard her at the time, too overwhelmed by the reality of losing her to imagine a future beyond grief. But now her words came back to him with the force of permission. Be happy. Do not be alone. On the 4th day, a woman appeared at his croft just as he was preparing the morning dye bath. She was human, perhaps 30, with auburn hair and a pleasant face, wearing a well-made dress that spoke of some prosperity. She introduced herself as Judith Carmichael, widow of the late miller, and said she had heard his indigo was the finest in the region. "I need cloth for a dress," she explained. "A good blue for my cousin's wedding next month. Can you supply it?" Tobias assured her he could and showed her samples of his work. Judith examined them with a discerning eye, asking intelligent questions about dye fastness and weave quality. She was easy to talk to, knowledgeable about textiles, and she made several appreciative comments about the organization of his workspace. "You run a tidy operation, Mr. Donnelly," she said, smiling. "My late husband always said you could judge a craftsman by his workspace." "Your late husband was wise," Tobias said politely. "He was." Judith's smile turned wistful. "I miss him terribly, of course, but life goes on, does it not? We must make the best of what remains." There was something pointed in the way she said it, a deliberate emphasis that made Tobias suddenly wary. Judith stayed longer than the business required, asking about his work and his life with what seemed like more than professional interest. She mentioned how difficult it must be, managing everything alone. She wondered aloud whether he ever considered taking on an apprentice or perhaps a partner. "Someone to help with the work," she said, her eyes on his face, "and perhaps share the burdens of daily life as well." Tobias understood then what was happening. This was not just a customer inquiry. This was a deliberate overture, a suggestion of possibility, and he realized with sudden clarity that Judith Carmichael had not appeared at his croft by accident. Someone had sent her, or at least encouraged her, someone who thought a widower and a widow of similar age and station were a natural match. "I manage well enough on my own," Tobias said carefully. "But thank you for your concern, Mistress Carmichael." Judith smiled, unperturbed. "Of course. I did not mean to presume. But if you ever find yourself in need of company, Mr. Donnelly, I hope you will remember that you have neighbors who care for your well-being." She left with her order placed, and a promise to return for the finished cloth in 2 weeks. Tobias stood in the doorway watching her go, feeling vaguely unsettled. Judith was a perfectly nice woman, appropriate in every way, and he felt absolutely nothing for her. The contrast with Fenna could not have been starker. Where Judith's conversation had been pleasant but forgettable, Fenna's questions had sparked genuine engagement. Where Judith's interest had felt calculated, Fenna's had been startlingly sincere. Where Judith made him feel like a suitable match on paper, Fenna made him feel alive. That evening, as Tobias sat alone on his porch watching the sun set over the lake, he pulled out the small notebook he had kept during Catherine's illness. He had written in it every day those last months, recording her words and his fears, trying to make sense of the unfairness of losing someone so young. After she died, he had been unable to look at it, the pages too full of pain. But now he opened it carefully, reading through entries he had not touched in 3 years. Catherine's voice came through in his transcribed words, practical and loving and fiercely adamant that he not sacrifice his future to her memory. "I want you to live, truly live," she had said 2 weeks before the end. "Not just survive. Promise me you will take joy where you find it, Tobias. Promise me you will not lock your heart away because mine stopped beating," he had promised. And then he had broken that promise, spending 3 years in self-imposed isolation. But Fenna had cracked that isolation open, not through force but through persistent, genuine interest. She had seen him, not as a tragic figure or a convenient match, but as himself, and she had loved what she saw. Could he really turn away from that? Could he really choose loneliness and propriety over the chance at happiness? Tobias closed the notebook gently. Then he stood, went inside, and lit a lamp. He pulled out paper and ink and wrote a brief note in his careful script. "Fenna, please come back tomorrow. I would like to continue our conversations. Tobias." He walked the 2 miles to the Oakhart farm in the gathering dark, his heart pounding. The farmhouse was small but well kept, smoke rising from the chimney. Tobias knocked, and an older orc man answered, eyeing him with surprise and some suspicion. "I am looking for Fenna Oakhart," Tobias said. "I have a message for her." The man called over his shoulder, and Fenna appeared a moment later. Her eyes widened when she saw Tobias. "What are you doing here, delivering this?" He held out the note. "I am sorry I made you walk all this way to my croft so many times. It seemed only fair I should walk to you at least once." Fenna took the note, read it quickly, and looked up with such hope in her face that Tobias felt his resolve solidify into certainty. "Tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow," he confirmed. "And Fenna, I have been thinking about what you said, about there being room in a heart for more than one love. I think you might be right." Her smile was like sunrise, brilliant and transformative. "I will be there at midday." "I will have tea ready," Tobias said. "With honey." He walked home feeling lighter than he had in years, as though some heavy burden he had been carrying had finally been set down. The path ahead was uncertain, full of complications and potential judgment, but for the first time since Catherine's death, he felt ready to face it. Fenna arrived the next day precisely at midday, journal in hand but a different energy about her. She seemed less like a student and more like an equal, meeting his eyes with quiet confidence. "I thought about what you said," Tobias began as he poured the tea, "about studying me to understand what would make me happy." "And?" Fenna asked, accepting her cup. "I think you missed something important in your research," her ears tilted with curiosity. "What did I miss?" "You never asked me directly what would make me happy," Tobias said. "You observed and recorded, but you never just posed the question outright." Fenna considered this. "You are right. That was an oversight, so I am asking now, what would make you happy, Tobias?" He set down his cup and looked at her directly. "You, being here with you makes me happy. Talking with you makes me happy. The way you look at the world, the way you approach everything with such determination and honesty, that makes me happy. I have spent 3 years convinced I was done with happiness, and then you appeared at the edge of my property asking impossible questions, and I remembered what it feels like to want something." Fenna's hands tightened around her cup. "What do you want, to court you properly?" Tobias said. "If you are willing to take whatever time we need to be certain this is right. I know there will be complications. People will talk. Your family may object to you courting a human. The settlement may object to me courting an orc. I am older than you, set in my ways, and I still grieve my wife sometimes. But if you are willing to accept all of that, then I would like to try." "Yes," Fenna said immediately. "Yes, absolutely yes." Then she paused, opened her journal to a fresh page, and wrote something down with a small smile. "What are you writing?" Tobias asked, amused despite himself. "That you prefer direct communication over ambiguity," Fenna said, "and that you believe in doing things properly, and that you are braver than you give yourself credit for. Still taking notes on me, always," Fenna said cheerfully. "I told you, I want to understand what makes you happy. That project does not end just because you have agreed to court me. If anything, it becomes more important." Tobias found himself laughing, a real laugh that came from deep in his chest. "You are unlike anyone I have ever known, Fenna Oakhart." "Good," she said, grinning. "I would hate to be ordinary." They spent the afternoon talking, but the dynamic had shifted. It was no longer a lesson but a genuine exchange, both of them asking and answering, learning each other's histories and hopes. Fenna told him about growing up in the Southern Territories, about her family's decision to move north in search of better land and fewer conflicts with human settlements. Tobias told her about his apprenticeship to a dyer in his youth, about meeting Catherine at a harvest dance, about the quiet joy of their years together and the hollowness of losing her. I am not trying to replace her, Fenna said carefully. I want you to know that. I am not asking you to forget her or stop loving her. I know, Tobias said, and I appreciate that. But Fenna, you need to understand something. If we do this, if we build something together, it will be its own thing. Not a replacement or a copy of what I had before, but something new. You deserve that. You deserve to be loved for yourself, not as a substitute for someone else. Fenna's eyes shone. You already love me, do you not? That is what you are saying. Tobias felt his face heat. I am saying I am falling. I am saying I want to fall if you will catch me. I will, Fenna promised. I absolutely will. The courtship began in earnest after that, conducted with a peculiar mix of Fenna's orcish directness and Tobias's human propriety. She would arrive at his croft most afternoons, and they would work side by side, Fenna helping with tasks around the dye yard while Tobias taught her the finer points of his craft. She had a good eye for color and a steady hand, and she proved surprisingly adept at the precise timing required for successful dyeing. You would make a fine dyer yourself, Tobias told her one afternoon as she carefully lifted a length of wool from an indigo bath, the wet fiber a rich, satisfying blue. Would I? Fenna asked, pleased. Perhaps you could teach me properly. I would like to learn. I would like to teach you, Tobias said. Though I should warn you, it takes years to master. Good, Fenna said. I am planning to be around for years. The certainty in her voice made Tobias's heart stutter. He was not used to such confidence about the future, but Fenna seemed to have no doubts whatsoever. She knew what she wanted, and what she wanted was him. It was humbling and terrifying and wonderful all at once. They were not left in peace for long. Word spread quickly through the small frontier community that Tobias Donnelly was being courted by an orc woman, and opinions were sharply divided. Some neighbors were merely curious, stopping by the croft on transparent pretexts to catch a glimpse of the unusual couple. Others were openly disapproving, muttering about propriety and natural order and the dangers of mixing with non-humans. The strongest opposition came from Judith Carmichael, who seemed to take Tobias's relationship with Fenna as a personal affront. She appeared at his croft one morning while Fenna was helping him prepare a batch of weld for yellow dye, her expression tight with displeasure. "Mr. Donnelly, might I have a word with you?" Judith asked, her eyes sliding over Fenna with barely concealed distaste. "In private." "Anything you need to say to me can be said in front of Fenna," Tobias replied calmly. Though his jaw was tight, Judith's lips thinned. "Very well. I came to speak to you as a friend, Tobias, because I am concerned for your welfare and your reputation. People are talking about your association with this orc girl, and not kindly. You are making yourself a subject of gossip and speculation." "Let them talk," Tobias said. "It is not just talk," Judith pressed. "You are isolating yourself from the community. You are jeopardizing your business relationships. Some of your regular customers have expressed discomfort with the situation." "Which customers?" Tobias asked sharply. Judith waved a hand vaguely. "That is not the point. The point is that you are throwing away your standing in this community for a passing fancy, a momentary infatuation with something exotic. You deserve better, Tobias. You deserve someone appropriate, someone who can be a true partner to you." "Fenna is a true partner to me," Tobias said, his voice hardening. "She is kind and intelligent and skilled. She makes me happy. What exactly is inappropriate about that? She is an orc," Judith said bluntly. "You are a respected human craftsman. The two do not belong together, and you know it. This is not about her personally. I am sure she is perfectly nice, but there are natural boundaries to bias between species, between cultures. Crossing them causes nothing but pain and difficulty. My relationship with Fenna is not your concern, Mistress Carmichael," Tobias said coldly. I appreciate your purported concern for my welfare, but I must ask you to respect my choices and leave us in peace. Judith's face flushed. I am trying to help you. I had hoped we might find companionship together, two people who understand loss and loneliness. But you would rather throw yourself away on a girl half your age who cannot possibly understand what you need. You are wrong about that, Fenna said quietly. She had been silent throughout the exchange, but now she stepped forward, her chin lifted. I know exactly what Tobias needs because I have spent months learning him. I know he needs patience and gentleness, and someone who respects his grief without being consumed by it. I know he needs work that uses his hands and his mind. I know he needs quiet mornings and the smell of the lake and tea with honey. I know these things because I paid attention, because his happiness matters to me more than my pride or my comfort. Can you say the same? Judith stared at her, then at Tobias, her expression shifting from anger to hurt. I see. I hope you do not come to regret this, Tobias. I truly do. She turned and left, her back rigid with wounded dignity. Tobias let out a long breath and scrubbed a hand over his face. I am sorry you had to endure that. Do not apologize, Fenna said. She was wrong and you defended me. That is all that matters. She paused, then added more softly, Does it bother you? The talk, the disapproval. It bothers me that people are unkind, Tobias admitted. But their opinions do not change how I feel about you. If anything, it makes me more certain. Because when I think about giving you up to satisfy gossips and small-minded fools, I cannot bear it. You are worth more than their approval. Fenna's eyes were bright with emotion. You are worth more than their approval too. Do not forget that. They went back to work, but the encounter left Tobias unsettled. He did not regret his choice, but he worried about the consequences for Fenna. She was young, trying to build a life in a new place, and his courtship might make that harder. When he voiced these concerns that evening, Fenna shook her head firmly. My family supports us, she said. That is what matters. My parents have met you and they approve. They see how you treat me, how you look at me, and they are glad I have found someone worthy of my affection. Even though I am human, they do not care about that. They care that I am happy. Fenna took his hand, her green fingers lacing through his. Stop borrowing trouble, Tobias. We have enough real challenges without inventing new ones. She was right, as she often was. Tobias squeezed her hand and let the worry go. Summer deepened into full bloom, the dye yard bursting with color. Tobias's vats were filled with flowers and leaves and roots, producing the full spectrum from pale cream to deepest black. Fenna worked beside him daily now, learning to judge the readiness of a dye bath by smell and color, to control temperature with careful attention to the fire, to rinse and dry and set the finished cloth. She was a quick study, and Tobias found himself relying on her more and more, not just for labor but for her opinions and insights. You have a gift for this, he told her one afternoon as she examined a batch of madder-dyed wool, checking for evenness of color. A real talent. Fenna looked pleased. I enjoy it. There is something satisfying about taking raw materials and transforming them into something beautiful and useful. I understand why you love this work. It helps that I have good company now, Tobias said. The work was lonely before. I did not fully realize how lonely until you arrived. Fenna set down the wool and turned to face him fully. Tobias, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Her serious tone made him nervous. All right. You still feel guilty about loving me? About moving forward from Catherine. Tobias considered the question carefully. Sometimes, he admitted. Not because I think Catherine would disapprove. I know she would want me to be happy, but because it feels strange to be so content when she did not get the chance to have a full life. It feels unearned somehow. Happiness is not something you earn, Fenna said gently. It is something you accept when it is offered. You did nothing wrong by surviving her, Tobias. You did nothing wrong by continuing to live. I know that in my head, Tobias said. My heart takes longer to catch up. Then I will wait for your heart, Fenna said. But I will not let you sabotage this because you think you do not deserve it. You do deserve it. You deserve love and joy and partnership, and I am going to keep reminding you of that until you believe it. Tobias pulled her into his arms, holding her close. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucking just under his chin. Thank you, he murmured into her hair, for your patience, for your certainty, for being willing to love a difficult, grieving man. You are not difficult, Fenna said, her voice muffled against his chest. You are careful. You think deeply about things. Those are virtues, not flaws. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped together in the late afternoon light, the smell of dye and flowers all around them. Tobias felt something settle in his chest, some last piece of resistance finally dissolving. This was right. Fenna was right. They were right together. I love you, he said quietly. I should have said it sooner, but I was afraid. I am not afraid anymore. I love you, Fenna Oakhart, and I want to build a life with you. Fenna pulled back just enough to look up at him, her eyes shining. I love you too. I have loved you for months, since the very beginning, and I want to build a life with you too, whatever that looks like. I want to marry you, Tobias said, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. Not immediately. We should court properly, give people time to adjust, but eventually. I want you to be my wife if you will have me. Yes, Fenna said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, absolutely yes. I will marry you, Tobias Donnelly, and I will be the best wife you could ask for. You already are, Tobias said and kissed her. It was their first kiss, and it was sweet and tentative and absolutely perfect. Fenna's tusks pressed gently against his lips, a reminder of her orcish nature, but it did not feel strange or foreign. It felt like Fenna, like the woman he loved, and that was all that mattered. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like fools. Fenna reached for her journal, which was never far from her side, and Tobias laughed. Still taking notes, he asked. Always, Fenna said, opening to a fresh page. First kiss, sweet, surprising, absolutely wonderful. Subject appeared nervous but sincere. I may have forgotten how to breathe. Tobias shook his head fondly. You are going to fill 100 journals with observations about me, are you not? At least, Fenna agreed cheerfully. I plan to study you for the rest of my life, Tobias. There is always more to learn about the people we love. Then I suppose I should start taking notes on you as well, Tobias said. To be fair. Fenna's eyes lit up. Would you really? I would love to read your observations about me. Then I will write them, Tobias promised. Though I warn you, my handwriting is nowhere near as neat as yours. They spent the rest of the evening planning their future, talking through the practicalities of merging their lives. Fenna would move to the Croft after the wedding, helping Tobias with the dye work full-time. They would expand the operation, perhaps taking on larger commissions from distant settlements. They would build a life together, creating something new and wholly their own. The engagement was not publicly announced, but word spread anyway through the small community. Reactions were mixed, as Tobias had expected. Some neighbors offered cautious congratulations. Others expressed open disapproval. The local minister suggested, with pointed delicacy, that Tobias might want to reconsider such an unconventional match. Marriage is a sacred bond, the minister said, visiting the Croft on a warm August afternoon. It should be entered into with full consideration of compatibility and appropriateness. I am not certain that a human and an orc can truly build a godly union. Then you have not been paying attention, Tobias replied evenly. Fenna and I are more compatible than many human couples I have known. We share values and goals. We communicate well. We make each other better people. What is inappropriate about that? The physical differences alone, the minister began, are none of your concern, Tobias interrupted, his patience finally fraying. With respect, minister, my relationship with Fenna is between us and God. Unless you can point to scripture that explicitly forbids humans and orcs from marrying, I suggest you keep your opinions on appropriateness to yourself. The minister left in a huff, and Tobias returned to his work, frustrated but unshaken. He had made his choice, and he would not be swayed by small-minded prejudice. But the opposition took a more serious turn when a group of men from the settlement appeared at the croft one evening, led by a burly farmer named Garrett Thorne. They carried no weapons, but their presence was clearly meant to intimidate. "We want to talk to you about your orc girl," Garrett said without preamble. "Some of us are concerned about what kind of example you are setting." "What kind of example would that be?" Tobias asked coldly. "That it is acceptable for humans to consort with non-humans," Garrett said. "We came out here to build a human settlement, Donnelly. We did not come here to mix with orcs or goblins or any other creature. You are blurring the lines that keep us safe." "Fenna is not a threat to anyone's safety," Tobias said. "She is a peaceful, hard-working woman who has done nothing to earn your hostility." "Maybe not yet," another man spoke up. "But what about when more orcs see that one of their women snagged herself a human husband? What kind of ideas does that give them? What if they start thinking they belong here, mixing with us, taking our resources?" "This is absurd," Tobias said flatly. "Fenna's family bought their land legally and farms it honestly. They have as much right to be here as any of you. More, perhaps, because they have not shown up at anyone's home making threats." "This is not a threat," Garrett said. "This is a warning. You are making things difficult for the rest of us, Donnelly. We would appreciate it if you would reconsider this engagement before you cause real problems." "The only problem I see," Tobias said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, "is a group of men who think they have the right to dictate my personal choices. I am going to ask you to leave my property. Now." Garrett stared at him for a long moment, then spat into the dust. "Fine. But do not say we did not warn you when this blows up in your face." They left, but the encounter shook Tobias more than he wanted to admit. When Fenna arrived the next day, he told her what had happened, watching her face darken with anger. "They threatened you?" she asked. "They tried to intimidate me," Tobias corrected. "There is a difference. But Fenna, I need you to understand what we are facing. This will not be easy. People will make our lives difficult. They may refuse to trade with us or spread rumors or worse. I need to know you are prepared for that." "I am prepared for anything," Fenna said fiercely. "I am not giving you up because some cowards are afraid of change. If they want to make trouble, let them try. We will face it together." Her courage bolstered his own. Tobias pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, herbs and sun-warmed earth. "Together," he agreed. "Always together." The weeks that followed were tense but uneventful. Tobias threw himself into his work, preparing for the autumn rush when settlements stocked up on dyed wool for winter clothing. Fenna worked beside him, and together they produced some of the finest cloth Tobias had ever created. The work was good, the partnership was good, and Tobias found himself more hopeful about the future than he had been in years. It was late September when everything shifted. Fenna arrived at the croft in mid-morning, earlier than usual, her face flushed with excitement. "My parents have given us their blessing," she announced. "Officially, they want to meet with you to discuss the wedding arrangements." Tobias set down the wool he had been sorting. "What brought this on? I thought we were waiting until spring." "We were," Fenna said. But my father said there is no point in waiting when we are both certain. He said if we are going to be together, we might as well make it official and stop giving the gossips ammunition. Tobias considered this. He is not wrong, and I am certain, Fenna. More certain than I have been about anything in a long time. Then let us do it, Fenna said. Let us get married before winter. Small ceremony, just family and a few friends. We can have a larger celebration in the spring if we want, but I want to be your wife, Tobias. I do not want to wait any longer. Looking at her eager face, Tobias could not find a single reason to refuse. All right, he said, grinning despite himself. Let us get married, before winter. I will speak with your parents tonight. Fenna squealed and threw herself into his arms, nearly knocking him over. Tobias caught her, laughing, and spun her around. When he set her down, she immediately pulled out her journal. What are you writing now? Tobias asked, still smiling. That you look happiest when you are making me happy, Fenna said, her voice tender. That you smile with your whole face when you are genuinely pleased, that you are going to be the most wonderful husband. You are biased, Tobias said. Completely, Fenna agreed, but also correct. That evening, Tobias walked to the Oakhart farm to speak with Fenna's parents formally. Her father, Gareth, was a broad-shouldered orc with graying hair and a stern but fair demeanor. Her mother, Olna, was smaller and quicker, with sharp eyes and a warm smile. They welcomed Tobias into their home and sat him down at their kitchen table. Our daughter tells us you wish to marry before winter, Gareth said without preamble. Is this true? It is, Tobias confirmed. If you will give your blessing, I would be honored to make Fenna my wife as soon as arrangements can be made. You love her? Olna asked, studying his face. I do, very much. And you understand what you are asking for, Gareth said. A marriage between human and orc will not be easy. You will face opposition and difficulty. You may be shunned by parts of your own community. Are you prepared for that? I am, Tobias said steadily. Fenna is worth any difficulty. She makes me happy. She makes me better. I want to spend my life with her, regardless of what others think. Gareth and Olna exchanged a long look. Then Olna smiled. Then you have our blessing, Tobias Donnelly. Fenna has chosen well. Relief flooded through him. Thank you. I promise I will do everything in my power to make her happy. See that you do, Gareth said, but there was warmth in his voice now. She is our only daughter and precious to us. We are trusting you with her heart. I will guard it with my life, Tobias vowed. They spent the next hour discussing logistics. The wedding would take place at the croft, on the porch overlooking the lake, in early October when the leaves were turning and the air was crisp. It would be a simple ceremony, combining elements of both human and orc tradition. Fenna's family would attend, along with a few neighbors who had proven themselves accepting. Minister might be excluded given his disapproval, so they would find someone else to officiate. My cousin is a lay speaker, Olna offered. He could perform the ceremony according to orcish custom, which recognizes all honorable unions regardless of species. That would be perfect, Tobias said gratefully. When the planning was finished, Fenna walked Tobias partway back to his croft, the two of them strolling slowly under the stars. Are you nervous? Fenna asked, slipping her hand into his. A little, Tobias admitted. Not about marrying you, about everything else. I want our wedding to be joyful, not overshadowed by conflict. It will be joyful, Fenna said firmly. Because we will be together, and that is all that matters. The people who love us will celebrate with us. The people who do not can stay away. When did you become so wise? Tobias asked, smiling. I have been studying the wisest man I know, Fenna said, squeezing his hand. I learned from the best. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Tobias and Fenna cleaned and organized the croft, preparing space for Fenna's belongings. They dyed cloth in rich autumn colors for the ceremony, deep reds and golds and browns. Olna helped Fenna sew a simple but beautiful dress, forest green to complement her skin, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Tobias had a new shirt and vest made, dyed a deep blue that Fenna had declared his best color. Not everyone was pleased about the upcoming wedding. Judith Carmichael made her disapproval known loudly at the trading post, and several neighbors expressed dismay. But there were also unexpected sources of support. The trader who supplied Tobias with mordants and chemicals sent a gift of fine wine with his congratulations. An elderly woman who lived near the lake brought Fenna a basket of herbs and spices, traditional human wedding gifts. Even some who had initially been skeptical softened when they saw how happy Tobias seemed, how the sadness that had shadowed him for years had finally lifted. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue and the air carrying the sharp scent of autumn. Tobias woke early, nervous energy thrumming through him. He washed and dressed carefully, combing his hair and trimming his beard. When he caught sight of himself in the mirror, he barely recognized the man looking back. There was light in his eyes, color in his cheeks, a liveliness that had been absent for so long. Catherine would be glad, he thought. She would be so glad I found my way back to happiness. The ceremony was set for mid-afternoon. Guests began arriving around noon. Fenna's parents and extended family, a few sympathetic human neighbors, the lay speaker who would officiate. Tobias greeted everyone, his nerves settling as he saw the genuine warmth and support in most faces. Then Fenna emerged from the house where she had been getting ready, and Tobias forgot how to breathe. She was radiant. The green dress brought out the richness of her skin, and she had woven small white flowers into her dark hair. She wore no jewelry except a simple silver bracelet Tobias had given her, and she needed nothing else. Her beauty was not the conventional human sort, but it was beauty nonetheless, striking and unique and entirely her own. She crossed the yard to where Tobias waited on the porch, her eyes locked on his. When she reached him, she took his hands, her smile brilliant. "Ready," she whispered. "Completely," Tobias whispered back. The ceremony was brief and beautiful. Fenna's cousin spoke eloquently about the nature of commitment and partnership, about choosing to walk through life alongside another person. He invoked both human and orcish traditions, acknowledging the unique nature of this union and blessing it accordingly. Tobias and Fenna exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising love and loyalty and partnership through whatever challenges lay ahead. "I promise to study you for the rest of my life," Fenna said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "To keep learning what makes you happy and to spend my days trying to provide it. I promise to be your partner in work and in joy. I promise to love you with everything I am." "I promise to see you clearly and love you truly," Tobias replied, his own voice thick with emotion. "To honor your strength and nurture your heart. I promise to build a life with you that is ours alone, new and precious and worth every difficulty we face. I promise to love you with all I have." They exchanged rings, simple silver bands that Tobias had commissioned from a sympathetic blacksmith. When the lay speaker pronounced them married, Tobias cupped Fenna's face in his hands and kissed her thoroughly, not caring who was watching. The small gathering cheered, and Tobias felt a joy so fierce it was almost painful. This was his wife. Fenna was his wife. He had a future again, bright and full of possibility. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. Olna had prepared a feast of roasted vegetables and meat, fresh bread and preserves. Tobias had contributed several bottles of wine from his small cellar, saved from his marriage to Catherine and never drunk. It felt right to open them now, to toast new beginnings with the remnants of the past. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in shades of orange and pink, Tobias and Fenna stood together at the edge of the water, watching the light shimmer across the surface. "Are you happy?" Fenna asked, leaning against his side. "Happier than I have been in years," Tobias said honestly. "Happier than I thought I could be again. You did that, Fenna. You brought me back to life." "We did it together," Fenna corrected gently. "You were willing to try. You were willing to let me in. That took courage." "I had a good teacher," Tobias said, smiling down at her. "Someone who showed me that it was all right to want things, to reach for happiness instead of just surviving." Fenna pulled out her journal, worn now from months of constant use, and showed him a page from early on. "Look, the first note I ever took about you," Tobias read. "Tobias Donnelly. Dyer and weaver, kind eyes, offered tea to a stranger." "That was all it took," Fenna said softly. "One act of simple kindness and I was gone. Everything after that was just me trying to understand why my heart had chosen you so quickly." "And did you find your answer?" Tobias asked. "I did," Fenna said. "Because you are good. Because you are patient and skilled and thoughtful. Because you treat everyone with dignity, even awkward orc girls who show up asking impossible questions. Because you loved your wife so well that I knew you could love that way again. Because your grief made you gentle instead of hard. Because 100 small reasons and one big one." "What is the big one?" "Because you are you," Fenna said simply. "And that is more than enough." Tobias kissed her forehead, overwhelmed by the enormity of her faith in him. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already do," Fenna said, "but I will not stop you from trying." They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared. Behind them, their guests were beginning to depart, calling farewells and congratulations. Tomorrow they would begin their married life in earnest, working side by side in the dye yard, building something new together. There would be challenges, Tobias knew. Prejudice did not disappear overnight, and they would face opposition and difficulty. But standing there with Fenna in his arms, his wife, his partner, his unexpected joy, Tobias felt ready for anything. He had closed the notebook of his grief and opened a new chapter. He had allowed himself to love again, and the world had not ended. Instead, it had bloomed into something richer and more beautiful than he had imagined possible. "Come on," Fenna said, tugging his hand. "Everyone is leaving. We should say goodbye properly." They walked back to the house together, hand in hand, and Tobias marveled at how natural it felt, how right. This was his life now. This was his future. And it was good. The guests departed one by one, each offering final congratulations and well wishes. Fenna's parents were the last to leave, Olna embracing her daughter tightly and Gareth shaking Tobias's hand with grave approval. "Take care of each other," Gareth said. "We will," Tobias promised. When the yard was finally empty and quiet, Tobias and Fenna stood together on the porch, surveying the space that was now theirs together. The dye vats gleamed in the moonlight. The lake lapped gently at the shore. Everything was peaceful and still. "What are you thinking?" Fenna asked. "That I am grateful," Tobias said. "That I am blessed beyond measure, that I cannot wait to see what we build together." Fenna smiled and pulled out her journal one more time. "One last note for the day. What are you writing?" "Wedding night." Subject appeared content, grateful and deeply in love. Subject's wife feels exactly the same way. Beginning of forever achieved successfully. Tobias laughed and pulled her close. "No more studying for tonight, just being." "Just being," Fenna agreed, setting the journal aside. "I can do that." They went inside together, into the house that was now theirs, into the life they would build side by side. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds held tight to their hard-won happiness. The days settled into a rhythm after the wedding. Fenna moved her belongings to the croft, blending her few possessions with Tobias's established household. They rearranged the workspace to accommodate two people working in tandem, and Fenna proved to be not just a capable assistant but an innovative partner, suggesting improvements to processes Tobias had been doing the same way for years. What if we prepared the indigo vats in a different order? She asked one morning. If we started the woad fermentation 3 days earlier, we could have a continuous rotation instead of these gaps where nothing is ready. Tobias considered her proposal and realized she was right. Within a week, they had implemented a new system that increased their output significantly without requiring any more actual labor. Word spread through the settlements that the quality of Donnelly's dyes had somehow improved, and new orders began to arrive. Not everyone was pleased by their success. Garrett Thorne made it known that he would not purchase cloth from an orc-loving trader, and a few others followed his lead. But for every customer they lost to prejudice, 2 more appeared, drawn by the quality of the work and unbothered by the unconventional partnership producing it. People care more about good cloth than they do about gossip, Fenna observed one evening as they reviewed their accounts. Once they see we do excellent work, most of them stop caring who I am. Not all of them, Tobias said, thinking of Judith Carmichael's continued cold disapproval whenever they encountered her at the trading post. No, not all, Fenna agreed. But enough. More than enough. Winter came gradually, the lake freezing at the edges and snow dusting the dye yard. Work slowed during the coldest months, as it always did, and Tobias and Fenna used the time to maintain equipment, plan for spring, and simply enjoy each other's company. They spent long evenings by the fire, Tobias reading aloud while Fenna worked on embroidery or playing cards or just talking. "Tell me about when you were young," Fenna said one night, curled against his side. "Before you were a dyer, what did you want to be?" "A sailor," Tobias admitted. "I grew up near the coast and I was fascinated by ships and the ocean. I wanted to see the whole world." "What changed?" "My father needed help with the farm. Then I apprenticed to a dyer because the master offered good terms. Then I met Catherine and suddenly I did not want to go anywhere. I wanted to stay exactly where I was." He paused. "I have no regrets though. The life I built was a good one." "And now?" Fenna asked. "Do you ever wish you had sailed away?" "Never," Tobias said firmly. "If I had, I would not have ended up here, I would not have met you, and that would be a tragedy." Fenna kissed his shoulder. "Good answer." They celebrated the winter solstice according to both human and orcish traditions, lighting candles and exchanging small gifts. Tobias gave Fenna a set of fine graphite pencils for her journal keeping. Fenna gave Tobias a beautifully carved wooden box she had made herself, perfectly sized to hold his collection of color samples. "I thought you should have somewhere proper to keep them," she explained, "instead of that old crate." Tobias ran his fingers over the smooth wood, touched by the thoughtfulness. "It is perfect, thank you." "I am getting better at the woodworking," Fenna said, looking pleased. "Your neighbor, Mr. Halloway, has been teaching me. He says I have steady hands." "You do," Tobias agreed. "You could probably turn that into a side trade if you wanted." "Maybe," Fenna said. "But honestly, I am content with the dye work. I like working with you. I like that we are building something together." "So do I," Tobias said, "more than I can express." As winter deepened, they began to plan for the expansion Fenna had suggested earlier. They would add 2 more dye vats in the spring, which would allow them to take on larger commissions. Tobias would teach Fenna the more advanced techniques, the subtle variations that produced truly exceptional color. They might even begin experimenting with some of the rarer pigments, the ones Tobias had always wanted to try but had not had time for when working alone. "We could develop a specialty line," Fenna suggested, her eyes bright with excitement. "Premium dyes for wealthy customers willing to pay for truly unique colors. Purples and deep blues, colors that require expensive materials and great skill." "That would require significant investment," Tobias cautioned. "The materials are costly, and there is no guarantee of success." "But imagine if it worked," Fenna said. "We could build a real reputation, attract customers from far beyond the frontier settlements. We could turn this croft into something truly special." Her enthusiasm was infectious. Tobias found himself imagining possibilities he had never dared to before, not just maintaining his business but actually growing it, creating something significant. With Fenna beside him, it seemed achievable. "All right," he said. "We will try it. In the spring, we will order the materials and begin experimenting." Fenna threw her arms around him, nearly spilling his tea. "Thank you for believing in my ideas. Thank you for treating me like a real partner, not just a helper." "You are a real partner," Tobias said, holding her close. "In every way that matters. I trust your judgment, Fenna. You are brilliant and creative, and I would be a fool not to listen to you." "You are not a fool," Fenna said, her voice muffled against his chest. "You are the wisest man I know." The winter months passed peacefully. The two of them cocooned in their small world by the lake. They ventured out only for necessary supplies, content to spend their days working and their evenings together. It was the happiest Tobias had been in years, perhaps in his entire life. There was a completeness to his days now, a sense of purpose and connection that had been missing even in his first marriage. He felt guilty about that sometimes, comparing Catherine and Fenna. It seemed disloyal to Catherine's memory to acknowledge that this relationship felt different, perhaps even deeper. But the truth was that he had been a different person when he married Catherine, young and unformed, and she had been equally young. They had grown together, which was beautiful, but they had also been limited by their youth and inexperience. With Fenna, he came as a complete person, weathered by loss and made wise by sorrow. And Fenna met him as an equal, not as a girl but as a woman who knew her own mind and heart. Their love was a choice made with full awareness, not the hopeful fumbling of youth. It was not better or worse than what he had shared with Catherine, but it was different, and he was allowed to cherish both. Spring arrived with a rush of warmth and new growth. The ice on the lake broke up, and migratory birds returned, filling the air with their calls. Tobias and Fenna threw themselves into work, preparing the expanded dye yard for the busy season ahead. The new vats were installed, and Tobias began teaching Fenna the advanced techniques he had promised. "The key with indigo," he explained, demonstrating the precise method of preparing the vat, "is patience. You cannot rush the fermentation. The bacteria need time to convert the plant material into pigment. If you try to speed it up, you get inferior color." Fenna watched intently, taking notes in a new journal she had started specifically for technical dyeing information. "How do you know when it is ready?" "Experience, mostly. The smell changes, becomes earthier. The surface develops a particular sheen. And when you pull up a sample, it oxidizes to blue within moments." He demonstrated, drawing up a cloth soaked in the vat. As they watched, the fabric transformed from greenish yellow to brilliant blue. "It is like magic," Fenna breathed. "It is chemistry," Tobias said, smiling. But chemistry can be magical. They worked side by side throughout the spring and into early summer, their partnership growing stronger with each passing week. Orders flowed in steadily, and their reputation continued to spread. The specialty line Fenna had suggested proved successful beyond their expectations. Wealthy merchants from distant towns began commissioning custom work, willing to pay premium prices for the exceptional colors Tobias and Fenna could produce. By midsummer, they were prosperous enough to hire occasional help for the heavy labor, freeing them to focus on the skilled work they both enjoyed most. They hired a young human man named Peter, son of one of their more accepting neighbors, to assist with the physical tasks of hauling water and firewood, maintaining equipment, and preparing raw materials. Peter was cheerful and unbothered by Fenna's orcish heritage, and he worked hard. "You are building quite an operation here," Peter observed one afternoon as he helped Tobias rinse a batch of dyed wool. "People are talking about how successful you have become." "Good talk or bad talk?" Tobias asked wryly. "Mostly good," Peter said. "There are always a few who will complain about anything, but most folks respect success and quality work. You two have proven yourselves." It was true, Tobias realized. The initial scandal of their marriage had faded into acceptance, helped along by their obvious competence and prosperity. People might still gossip, but they also wanted to buy from the best dyer in the region, and Tobias's work was undeniably superior. Even Garrett Thorne's hostility had softened, though not disappeared. He still would not trade with them directly, but he had stopped actively campaigning against them. Judith Carmichael remained coldly disapproving, but her influence was limited, and most people simply ignored her complaints. "We have made it," Fenna said one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained since their wedding. "We faced the opposition and we survived it. We built something good." "We did," Tobias agreed, his arm around her shoulders. "Together." "Do you ever think about children?" Fenna asked suddenly, her tone carefully casual in a way that told Tobias the question was anything but casual. His heart skipped. "I have thought about it. Do you want children?" "I think so," Fenna said. "Someday. Not immediately, but someday. I want to build a family with you if you are willing." Tobias thought about it seriously. He had wanted children with Catherine, but the timing had never been right, and then she had gotten sick. The old grief stirred briefly, then settled. That was the past. This was the present and the future. "I would like that," he said slowly. "I would like to have children with you. To see what we create together, not just in dye vats but in life." Fenna turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "You are sure? You are not just agreeing because I want it." "I am sure," Tobias said firmly. "I want to build a complete life with you, Fenna. Everything that entails. Children, if we are blessed with them, growing old together, all of it." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Then let us see what happens. No rush, but we will be open to it." "Open to it," Tobias agreed. The seasons turned, summer into autumn and autumn into winter again. The work continued, evolving and improving. Tobias taught Fenna everything he knew, and she proved an apt student, soon matching and sometimes exceeding his skill with certain techniques. They experimented with new plants and minerals, producing colors no one in the region had seen before. It was during the second winter of their marriage that Fenna began to suspect she was pregnant. She said nothing at first, waiting to be certain, but Tobias noticed the small changes. Her unusual tiredness, the way she avoided certain smells that normally did not bother her, the subtle protectiveness with which she moved. When she finally told him, one snowy evening by the fire, Tobias felt a rush of emotion so powerful it left him breathless. Joy and terror and wonder all mixed together. "Are you happy?" Fenna asked anxiously, watching his face. "Terrified," Tobias admitted. "But yes, incredibly happy." "We are going to be parents, Fenna. We are going to have a child." "A child who will be half human and half orc," Fenna said quietly. "I need you to understand what that means, Tobias. Our child will not fit neatly into either culture. They may face rejection and difficulty. Then we will teach them to be strong, Tobias said firmly. We will give them so much love and support that they will be able to face anything. And we will build a community around them of people who see them as we see them, as precious and perfect and worthy of respect. Fenna's eyes were bright with tears. You are going to be such a good father. I will certainly try, Tobias said. With you as their mother, they will have the best possible start. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Fenna continued to work in the dye yard for as long as she felt able, finally stepping back only in the last months when her growing belly made the physical labor too difficult. Tobias hired additional help to compensate, and he found himself protective and anxious in a way he had not anticipated. I am not fragile, Fenna reminded him when he tried to prevent her from lifting anything heavier than a teacup. Orc women work until the day they give birth, usually. I am fine, Tobias. I know you are fine, Tobias said, but let me fuss a little. I have never done this before, and I am terrified of something going wrong. Fenna softened. Nothing will go wrong. We are strong and healthy, and we have support. My mother has delivered dozens of babies. Your neighbor, Mistress Halloway, has offered to help. We will be fine. She was right, of course. When the time came, in early spring, as the world was turning green again, Fenna labored for 8 hours and delivered a healthy baby girl with minimal complications. Tobias held his daughter for the first time with shaking hands, awed by her tiny perfection. She had Fenna's green skin and pointed ears, but her features were softer, more human in shape. Her eyes, when she opened them, were dark like both her parents. She was beautiful and strange and absolutely perfect. What should we name her? Tobias asked, unable to look away from his daughter's face. Mara, Fenna said without hesitation. It means beloved in Orcish. Mara Donnelly, Tobias tested. It is perfect. She is perfect. She is ours, Fenna said, smiling tiredly. Our daughter. Our family. Tobias leaned down to kiss his wife's forehead, his daughter cradled carefully in his arms. Our family, he agreed. Everything I never knew I was allowed to want. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Mara was a healthy, curious baby, alert and active. She grew quickly, showing characteristics of both her heritages. Tobias found himself constantly amazed by her, by the miracle of her existence. The frontier community's reaction to Mara was mixed, as expected. Some neighbors cooed over her and brought small gifts. Others kept their distance, uncomfortable with a child who so clearly represented the blurring of racial boundaries. But there were enough people in the former category that Tobias and Fenna did not feel isolated. Fenna's parents doted on their granddaughter, visiting frequently and helping with childcare so Tobias and Fenna could maintain the business. The dye work continued to thrive, and they took on an additional permanent assistant, a young woman named Clara, who proved both skilled and utterly unconcerned about working for a mixed couple with a half-orc baby. My own parents were from different villages, Clara explained when Fenna thanked her for her acceptance. People said they did not belong together because of some old feud, but they were happy, and that is what mattered. I figure if two people love each other and treat each other well, the rest is just noise. I wish more people thought like you, Fenna said. Give it time, Clara said wisely. People get used to things. In 5 years, nobody will remember that your marriage was ever considered scandalous. She was not entirely right, but she was not entirely wrong either. As time passed, the novelty wore off. Tobias and Fenna became simply another hardworking couple in the community, known for their excellent dye work and their well-run business. Mara grew into a bright, lively toddler, and neighbors who had initially been wary found themselves charmed by her despite their prejudices. On a warm afternoon in late spring, nearly 4 years after Fenna had first appeared at the edge of Tobias's property, they worked together in the dye yard during bloom season. The air was thick, with the scent of flowers and fresh leaves. The vats gleamed in the sunlight, filled with rich pigments in every shade imaginable. Mara played nearby, carefully supervised by Clara, babbling happily to herself as she arranged stones in patterns. Fenna straightened from the vat she had been tending, stretching her back, and caught Tobias watching her with a soft expression. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Just thinking," Tobias said, "about how far we have come, about how different my life is now from what I expected 4 years ago." "Better or worse?" Fenna asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "So much better," Tobias said. "Better than I ever imagined it could be. You taught me that it was all right to be happy again, Fenna. You taught me that loving again was not betrayal but courage. You taught me to build something new instead of just mourning what was lost." "You taught me just as much," Fenna said, coming to stand beside him. "You taught me that patience and gentleness are strengths, not weaknesses. You taught me that love can be quiet and still be deep. You taught me that I was worthy of being studied and known and cherished, exactly as I am." She still carried a journal, though it had expanded beyond notes about Tobias to include records of their business, observations about Mara's development, recipes and techniques and ideas. But she still recorded things about Tobias too, small details she wanted to remember, moments she treasured. "You still have that first journal?" Tobias asked. "The one where you took notes when you were supposedly learning about human women?" "Of course," Fenna said. "It is one of my most precious possessions." "Can I see it?" Fenna looked surprised but pleased. She went into the house and returned with the worn leather journal, its pages yellowed slightly with age. She handed it to Tobias, and he opened it carefully. The first pages were exactly as he remembered. Earnest notes about courtship customs and appropriate gifts and what human women valued. But as he flipped through, he saw the point where the focus had shifted entirely to him. His preferences, his habits, his history. Page after page of observations, some profound and some mundane, all recorded with meticulous care. "I fell in love with you through this journal," Fenna said softly. "Writing down everything about you, trying to understand what made you who you are. Every detail I learned made me love you more." "I fell in love with you watching you take these notes," Tobias said. "Realizing that all your studying was really about me, that you cared enough to pay such close attention. No one had ever looked at me that way before, Fenna, like I was a subject worth studying in depth." "You are worth studying," Fenna said. "You are endlessly interesting to me. I could spend 100 years learning you and never be bored." Tobias closed the journal and pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, herbs and dye plants and home. "I love you. I am grateful for you every single day. Thank you for being stubborn enough to court me even when I tried to discourage you. Thank you for seeing something in me worth pursuing." "Thank you for being worth pursuing," Fenna said. "Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for building this life with me." They stood together in the dye yard, surrounded by the fruits of their labor, their daughter playing happily nearby. The lake stretched out before them, bright and peaceful in the afternoon sun. Everything they had built together was laid out around them. The thriving business, the comfortable home, the family they had created. "No regrets?" Fenna asked, then immediately made a face. "Sorry, I know we agreed never to end things with that question," Tobias laughed. "None whatsoever. Only gratitude and hope for the future." "Better," Fenna approved from her play area. Mara called out, "Mama, Papa, look!" She had arranged her stones into a surprisingly neat pattern, a circle with spokes radiating out like a flower. "That is beautiful, sweetheart," Fenna called back. Just like her mother, Tobias added. Fenna elbowed him gently, but she was smiling. They turned back to their work, moving in the comfortable synchrony of long partnership. The afternoon wore on, productive and peaceful exactly as it should be. This was happiness, Tobias thought. Not the absence of difficulty or sorrow, but the presence of love and purpose and connection. He had been given a second chance at life, at joy, at building something meaningful, and he had taken it. He had chosen courage over fear, openness over isolation, and the reward was everything spread out before him. A successful business, a wife he adored who adored him in return, a daughter who was healthy and happy, a future bright with possibility. It was more than enough. It was everything. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Tobias reached out to take Fenna's hand. She laced her fingers through his without looking, her attention on the vat she was tending, but the gesture was automatic and natural. They were partners in every sense of the word, and they would continue building this life together, one day at a time, one dye batch at a time, one moment of joy at a time. The lessons were over, had been over for years. But the learning continued, would always continue as they discovered new depths in each other and in themselves. And Tobias would not have it any other way. Evening approached, and they finished their work for the day, cleaning tools and banking fires with practiced efficiency. Mara had tired herself out and was rubbing her eyes, ready for dinner and bed. They gathered her up and headed inside together, a family returning to their home at the end of a good day. Behind them, the dye yard settled into quiet, the vats cooling, the colors deepening in the fading light. Everything was in its place, ordered and cared for, ready for tomorrow's work. Just like their lives, tended with care, built with intention, and rich with color and purpose and love, this was their forever, hard-won and precious. And it was perfect.